right, we are now recording. Welcome everyone. This is the Cross LEA Grade Passback webinar. I'm going to start out by saying that this video should be used for training purposes only, that we are using a sandbox server full of fake students, fake information, so nothing you see is going to be real, and any likeness to any real person is purely coincidental. So we know that when we started Power School way back in 2021, Cross LEA, it's what we use heavily, still heavily use it today for our enrollments into access classes. We have district to district enrollments into things like career tech centers, where you might have one district who sends students to another district's career tech center for them to take classes. And when we originally started, there was a grade passback process where once grades were stored, those grades would then just write back over to the historical grade screen of those students, and districts just had to go in and update, the credit types, how much credit was being awarded, whether they wanted it counted in GPA, whether it had an added value, things such as that. Well, that process, it lasted about 3/4 of the year, and the process broke. The processing architecture just was not well put together, and so Power School has had to do, it's almost been an entire rewrite of the entire process. So after much testing in our pilot environment, which I can say that our pilot environment is in no way like the real environment of 740,000 kids moving data left and right all day. So through what we could test on our side, we got it to a point that we were ready to then re-release it back to the districts and turn the grade passback back on. So what I'm going to show you today is what changes have been made and what you can expect as far as this grade passback. So first, let's talk about who is this going to impact. Well, it's only going to impact you as a district if you have students that you are cross enrolling into other districts' classes. So if you use Access, if you are enrolling students from your district into Access, this is going to impact you, because when they store their grades, instead of them sending you that file that you have to import, you now will have the grades come back over automatically. If you are sending, like I said, I know there's some CTE centers that you are sharing. Just because of where I live, I know that Roanoke City and Randolph County, Roanoke City sends kids to Randolph County's Career Tech Center. They're enrolled in classes over there. Now those grades will come back in to Roanoke City. I've seen pre-K students be shared across the district. So if you have anything set up where you are allowing those students to go into another district, then this is going to impact you. So the first thing is, we had a lot of people who said, well, Stacy, what if we don't want to do grade passback? What if we as a district, because I've only got 2 kids, what if we just want to manually put those grades in, because it's more for me to have to go through each one of those in historical grades than to just start them and put them in manually myself. Well, we've started to give options. So you as a district can decide whether you want to participate in this grade passback or not. So one of the first things that you're going to need to do, and this for your Power School administrators, you're going to have to check security on this. There is a new page that can be accessed from district office inside of Power School. So I'm in my pilot server right here, as you see. If you go under district management, district setup, you should have 2 cross LEA pages right here. So everybody should be familiar with the school enrollment capacity. Nothing with that has changed, but you now have this page of cross LEA settings. So the first 2 options are preset for you, and you want to leave them set as that for my suggestion. Your school-based enrollment caps, you still want those to be enabled. You have that on the capacity screen where you set those. And your remote summer school exceptions, where if you want to say that certain schools cannot enter in, you set them on the section level. So those are already set as they were. What we do have are 2 new areas that we have brought to your attention so that you can configure these within your district. So the first thing is, do you want to have your grade passback enabled for your district? Do you want your district to ingest the grades that we are going to pass back from Access or from whatever other district you might be enrolling your kids into? If you're a district that says, Stacy, appreciate you putting this together, but we're just going to put our grades in manually anyway, then you as a district can disable this so that you will not ingest any of the grades that we are going to try to send through in the nightly process. So that gives you control as a district whether you want to ingest grades or not. We are by default enabling it for all districts at this moment. So if you do not want to participate, you would have to go in and disable it. I would highly recommend that all district PowerSchool admins make sure you have security set on this page to see who can and cannot change these settings. And I wouldn't put too many hands in the cookie jar because you might be fighting each other on these settings. So just take that as a word of advice. You get one more area that you can configure as a district of, do you want to ignore these stored grades fields upon update? So we know that when grades are passed back, especially from Access, they don't come with credit values. They don't come with added values. They don't come with maybe the right GPA points, because you as a district define your policy for grading. And so just as it has been in the past, you will have to, once these grades do pass back, configure those for each one of these entries. Now, if you want to make sure that those stay and do not get overridden, then you will need to make sure that you check which one of these fields you want the stored grade passback process to ignore if you have put an update in those fields. So there are different ones here. You can hit control and select the ones that would be for you. So remember, Access does not push back whether it's included or excluded or a lot of things. If there are things you need to change, I know a lot of people change the store code because you store with the F's instead of the S's that come across in Access sometimes. If you need to update the percent, because especially if it's a credit recovery student, where you've got some district policy that says as far as credit recovery goes, the highest they can make is a 70, and you're going to have to go in and update those to a 70, then you'll want to make sure that percent is checked right here so that it does not get changed in those updates. So these are the settings that you as a district will have to decide you're going to need to either accept or lock down if you know you're going to be adjusting those fields inside of that historical grade record. Now, once you set those up, everything else then is on that storing district. Now, I will say there is a screen very similar to this screen right here that we have control of at the State Department. This is our enterprise controller. A lot of people have heard us talking about this. This is where we push down like the code sets and things such as that so that we're consistent across the state. There is a page very similar to this that I can turn this on and off at a state level and it will be used. So for example, as of right now, this moment, even though we have put this update across the state, this cross LEA grade passback is not turned on. So if anybody went in and stored something yesterday, it has not written back yet, and anything that has been stored this year has not been written back yet. Because one, I wanted y'all to have time to listen to this webinar so that you can make the decision of whether you want to start accepting these grades before I go turn it on for it to start writing back. Also, this will be disabled each time Access goes to store grades, and we did this on purpose. We want to be able to give Access time to go through store grades and validate that all grades that they have stored on their side are actually correct before we start pushing them back down into the districts. So when Access gets ready to store, and I believe they told me they were going to store around the 12th this week for our third quarter, we will turn this off. They will store their grades. They will verify that they didn't, accidentally capture a grade for a kid who had dropped an Access course or things such as that. Once they have verified they have everything in their historical grades table as it needs to be for it to come back down to the districts, we will then go in and re-enable this. Now, one of the key pieces to this update is the fact that we are only going to process grades modified within a certain time frame. And we did that on purpose because what we don't want this product to do is to say, hey, y'all have actually been storing grades for the last 3 years and this has been turned off, and we saw that we didn't send any of those grade backs. Let's go send back the whole last 3 years of grades. No, we don't want to do that because y'all have already manually updated those. So we were very much keeping this in a local time frame of control to say, okay, once we turn this back on, it's going to look for any grades that were stored in the last 8 days. and it will go then take any of those new grades and it will push those down into the district for you. Okay, so you will see those grades start to come through as long as they are within this window. Now, we can set this window anywhere from 1 to 30 days, and after having conversations with Access very early on, we decided that 8-day window would be appropriate enough so that if any changes had to be made once the grades did come down, then you would see that it would be able to be edited, and those edited changes would be able to come down to you without you having to change them manually. So for example, let's say that Access stored Mickey Mouse's grades. It went through, they thought everything was right, but the counselor at the district said, oh, well, something, 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 this should be a this. Okay, well, then if they were like, oh, yes, there was an issue, great catch there, and they go in on Access's side and update that grade, then that updated grade will still come back and be fixed as long as it's within that 8-day window. Anything outside of that would need to be done as a manual update or communication done. Or it could possibly be that they could request that I go in here, extend that window out a little bit longer and go, hey, we need it to have a couple more days because we had to make a like a large realm of changes. So rule of thumb for right now is think of it as being those 8 days. Now, because this is going to impact statewide storing with Access, I will send out communications and we'll have to coordinate with Access very heavily of when I will be turning off grade passback and when I will be turning it on so you can know when to expect those grades to come through. So when I do turn this on, I will email and let everyone know these are turned on, the grades will come through. Now, your question is going to be, when do they come through? Is this an hourly sync? Is this a nightly sync? So the answer to that, it is a nightly process. Instead of doing it like every hour like it used to be, that was causing issues because if there was a mistake made, once it got down into your server, there was no way for us to recall it. So if somebody accidentally stored grades that should not have been stored, that could have caused issues and y'all are having to manually go out and delete those. So in this situation, we're not going to have to deal with that, and we will let you know exactly when we'll turn it on, exactly when we'll turn it off, and you can expect it to come through in that nightly process, and it will update. It'll keep looking at it. We'll leave it on until it's time to store again, but each night it will look to see if any grades have been stored within the past 8 days. Now, this is not just for Access. As you know, your Crossing Road Career Tech students get grades stored. So let's go back to that Roanoke City and Randolph County situation. So let's say Randolph County is getting ready to store for their third 9 weeks. Now, we don't have to cut it off for them to go through and do as much because that would kind of almost be unrealistic to say we could turn this on and off for every individual LEA for when they're storing. So it'll only be turned off when Access is because of the 50,000 plus records that have to get updated at one time. But for the others, you're going to be working within that 8-day window. The good thing is it will consistently update within those 8 days. And so if you do have to make any changes, it will push those changes down that you update. The only thing that you need to know is if you are a district that accepts these cross-enrolled students, if you do store grades and realize that you stored for a grade that has to be deleted. So for example, if you stored a grade for me, but I had dropped the class, you will delete it, I'm sure, in your server. Randolph County would delete, Stacy's grade on their server because it shouldn't have been in there. It was an error. But that will not automatically delete it from Roanoke City if that is where I'm actually enrolled at. You'll have to give that communication to Roanoke City for them to take that out. So it's going to be a little bit different on the district to district cross enrollments, but not with the Access cross enrollments. Those will actually be able to be taken out because we're going to stop the sync process during that time. I had a couple of questions come in chat. This is just for updating. Will it affect the first time store? So Robbie, that's why we have this 8-day on there. It will not affect what you stored during first 9 weeks or second 9 weeks. It's just going to take effect with what has been stored with third 9 weeks. And when I turn this on, what will happen for the last 8 days. So because Access is fixing to store, we're not going to turn this on yet. I will send an email out to everyone letting them know that Access has finished storing and that I will be turning it on as of this date, and you can expect the grades to come in that night. I've also got the Power to School team who's going to be on standby, where we're going to kind of query which grades, how many grades should be coming over, so we can make sure that that net growth is, you know, realistic and we don't have any anomalies going out there, so we can really watch this since this is our first time in there. Yes, Robbie, and nobody has this days option except for me at the state. I control that at a local level. The only things that you have as a district is you have these options right here is, do you want to take them back and which do you keep from overriding? So Patrick, that might be why you're not seeing it if you were talking about that days. This is what you should see when you look at your district management, district setup, cross LEA settings. Well, the local LEA still receive these grades from Access if we opt to manually enter them. You would need to request them, Patrick. So if you are requesting that you just do a manual entry, you would need to talk to your support centers to see if they can provide that for you. Chris, do you recommend that we exclude from options? That's really going to be up to you, Chris, as far as, do you use those grades for your GPA calculations? Do you use them for graduation or honor roll or transcript? Most people do not exclude these from any of those, because especially these are mainly your high school students. I know some of y'all have some middle school students who are in there, but you definitely want those for your high school students to be counted toward this. Can we disable for Access, enable for Career Tech? Unfortunately, no. It's an all or nothing. Either you're accepting to ingest all of them, or you won't get any of them. So you'll have to make that decision of whether you want it to be on for all, for it to pass back, or for none at all. Now, there's a couple of enhancements that have also been made in what exactly passes back to the districts. So let me go to Mickey Mouse. Daniel, if it's highlighted, it is excluded. So if you have this highlighted, that means that you're saying you're going to be making updates to those fields and you do not want this process to overwrite those updates. All right, so if I go to Mickey Mouse right here and I go to his academic records and his historical course grades, this chemistry grade is one that was passed back through our testing of this grade passed back to make sure everything was working. One thing you are going to notice is that on these cross-enrolled grades, there is a new section that will now appear on the stored grades screen. These are not things that you can edit or modify in any way. These are bringing back data from the cross-enrolled district to you to give you some information about these sections, because I know one of the things that people, especially with Access, rely very heavily on are this section number. Now mine is not formatted like Access does, but you know that Access formats those to tell you whether it was a spring or a fall or a half credit or a whole credit, because that would help you in knowing what to award and what they had taken and what might need to be scheduled for the next round of their Access classes. So all of this data, the district ID, so it would say whether it was Access or if it was another district for a career tech center. It will tell you what term they were using. This GID number, which means absolutely nothing, but it's kind of the back-end identifier that allows us to connect to it. So if you do see an issue with grades, this number right here is very helpful in finding that specific record. The course name and the course number, which you know you're not allowed to update the course name and the course number for these grades. And then the section number and who the facilitator was. And then you get all of the information as it came in from that other District B Access or Career Tech Center, wherever it's at. Now, for those who are enrolling into Career Tech Centers and such, they typically do have GPA points and credits and things as that already in there, because they are configured as an awarding credit institution, whereas Access is not that. The districts award on behalf of the Access goals. So you'll see that kind of difference inside of there. Katie, our store codes and our term IDs are usually wrong, or so I'm told. Is there a better way I can double check these? I'm not the one who receives their updates file. So yes, they are typically different, and you are allowed to update those on these records, and most people do have to update those as part of this. Jackie, so it will be after the fact to update the grading periods. We do not code like Q1, Q2, and not S1, S2 because we're on block, or will it only send us F1? So Jackie, from my understanding, Access is still going to send the same way they have been with the S1s, S2s, and F1s, and you'll need to do that update of them. And that can either be done, well, that can be done through DDA. You can find them all in mass inside of there. And we do have some enterprise reports where you can look to see what was stored across those Access centers. I believe we showed how you can use that historical grades report to go through and just see that that storing agency was, the Access Support Center, or whether it was that Career Tech Center that you had them go to. Chris, does a passback process have to be one or the other and not a mix of manual and passback? I don't think I'm understanding that one, Chris. So if you turn grade pass back on, it's going to bring the grades back. There's still a manual component to grade pass back in far as you configuring these items here for the grade, because you decide the GPA points based on what your district's GPA policy is and whether it's an added value. If it's a weighted class or not, that's all LEA by LEA dependent, and how many credit hours it's worth. If a LEA disables the passback, do they have to go back each time you disable and enable for access storing of grades? Does it re-enable it again for gold if they have to disable it again? Okay, so the disabling here at the LEA level is for ingesting of the grades. This disabling at the state level is for dispersing of grades. So these two are not in any way connected to each other. Enabling one does not disable the other or any of that. So whatever you set as a district is what stays for you. I wouldn't recommend the turning off and back on over and over again of it at an LEA level. I would make that conscious decision of it. Do I leave it on or do I leave it off? Because if you were to do that turning off and on, somebody is inevitably going to forget at some point to turn it back on, and you're going to miss the window on these, and then it becomes an entire manual process on there. So when it comes to the grade passback, as far as the grade itself, it's not really changing. Like what happened at the very beginning when grade passback was turned on is still going to be there. You basically have the option now for it to be turned off if you don't want it to. But where all the real big rewriting came in was in the actual processing of these grades, because how it used to process and what all it processed with broke the grade passback altogether and how it was first created. So they had to rebuild that, really look at stored procedures and things such as that to get this process rewritten. So it's not a very big rewrite in what y'all should expect to see. It's just how the data is moving now is a little bit different. Daniel, so really for access, we need to turn off term ID because they never match ours and we can manually update. That's correct, Daniel. Aaron, just to confirm, the fields we set to ignore are only ignored for changes. The data comes in on initial store, correct? That is correct, Aaron. And here is a piece of advice that I would give everyone on here. Because we've set this for 8 days, when I send y'all the email to say, hey, I'm turning grade passback back on, and let's keep in mind, you remember the access stores well after y'all's traditional storing periods anyway. I know somebody's going to ask, oh, well, can we store sooner so that it gets on the report card? And y'all know that it just can't happen because they have to give extended deadlines and things such as that. But one thing I would say is that with that 8-day period, since we know that there could be changes within that 8-day period from access that are legit changes that need to be made, I, as a district, once you get the email from me saying, hey, we're turning on storing, this date, X day, I wouldn't have my people go in until those 8 days have passed so that we know it's not writing anything else anymore, so that all updates have been given inside of it from access. Because the last thing you want to happen is I tell you that the grades are storing, so you come in the next morning, you see all these new grades, so y'all decide to go ahead and award GPA credit, award this, award that. and then Access for some reason finds out something changes and we're still in that 8-day window to get them updated, it updates a grade and you've already set it based on a prior grade and now it doesn't match. I would wait until after that 8-day window of the storing goes through before I, as an LEA, would do any updates to those records that came in. You could definitely go ahead and search the historical grades table to find all of them that were in there. We, like I said, enterprise reports to pull all those together and then know what you're going to need to query in DDA to do those updates through it, or know who's going to need to divvy up if you're deciding that y'all are going to manually just update those records from the individual student record, because you can do either or. Yes, Chris, this is being recorded and I'll put it on YouTube and I'll email it out to everyone. Shelley, if we choose to opt out of the Passback, will Access automatically send those grades to us via spreadsheet as they have, or do we need to contact them? You would need to contact them and request. Aaron, changes will show in the change history. That is correct. Because it'll work in that typical way that your grades have in the past. Patrick, you're getting a 404 error on cross. Put in the ticket. Okay. And Kelly, you're not able to get to the district setup page as well? I'm going to put this link. See if you can copy and paste straight into the URL and see if the page comes up for you. If it doesn't, definitely put in a ticket. Lorenzo actually updated the plugin this morning because that wasn't working for me in Pilot, and he did it across the state. So if anybody's got missed, I need to know. So the exclusion is just for if a manual change is allowed or not. No. So what this exclusion is saying is that if you check this field, then you're saying that if your people edit that field once the grade comes in, you don't want it to be overwritten in that field. You're saying ignore these stored fields if an update occurs in the passback process. Brenda, I would. Okay, yes, if you're getting the 404 error after even inputting that link in the URL, go ahead and put in a support ticket so that we can get them to look at that plugin that's given that that settings page right there. Katie, but it will push the first time, just no edits after that. Correct, Katie. Everything has to push the first time. So this right here is saying that after the grade is there, if a change is made, whether you want it to keep that change or to overwrite the change back from wherever it's coming from. You can't see the plugin, Blake. It's one we have hidden from you. Because people will go in and turn the plugin off, not realizing what all it's doing, and they break their whole cross LEA stuff. So we had some of those. How can we tell who has exclusive access to this page? So you can pop your old school page permissions up on this and see, where you get the yellow bar on it to see which groups have access to this page and who does not. So if I go to enable page permissions and security, and I turn it on, and then I go back to this page. Come here. I can see which groups. And y'all know anytime they put a new page in, everybody's going to default to their default security group. So any security groups that you have stood up that have added access are automatically going to get added. Like everything goes to default. So if you're like, nope, I want everybody set to no access except I'm going to make group level 9 be the only one that has edit, and then submit, and that takes care of it for you. So you decide on which one of your groups. But yeah, pop your old school yellow bar page permissions so that you know who has access to change that and who does not. So right now, from the state level, this is turned off. We're going to get access is going to start storing. It's tomorrow or Wednesday 1. They're going to start storing. Once they are finished, then we will turn this on. I will send an email out letting everyone know that we have turned it on for everyone. And overnight, you should see those grades start to come in if you have your grade pass back enabled to ingest what we will then be dispersing. And it will stay on until fourth quarter when access gets ready to store again. So everybody from a career tech center, once I turn this on, any that you have stored within the last 8 days are going to come on through to your district. All right, any other questions from anyone? It's not a very deep or in-depth webinar as opposed to some of the other webinars we've done on topics, just because it's not changing much other than those grades are going to start moving back into the districts. Robert, should the term ID match ours or does it matter? It typically does not match because they shred out so many more terms in Access. What a lot of people do is they update all of the term IDs to be that overall year ID, 3,400, whatever it is, for the whole year. If theirs is a term ID that you do not have configured, you'll get that none message on there, which makes things go funky on transcripts and stuff, which is why a lot of people just find all of the access grades or and rewrite them. You typically don't have that issue for the grades that are coming from career tech centers because all districts in the state configure the same with the exception of access. So only on your access grades would they come back a little funny that you might want to update across the board. If Passback is on, will using enterprise reports be the most effective way in determining who would receive those access grades that need manual editing changing? Yes. Yes. And what I'll do is get with Scott to see if we can get a pinpoint specific, because right now we just kind of filter off of the overall historical grades report. But I'll see if we can get something that would be like, here it is, here are your cross enrolled grades that have passed back. Because I think we can key off of some of those now that we've got it turned back on. And we can get that enterprise report out to y'all. We'll try to make it as simplistic as possible. All right, any other questions from anyone? All right, let me go ahead and stop the recording so it can start rendering so we can get it on YouTube.